I've had enough of this. I'll pay $1,000,000 if anyone can fix this back pain. Right now. A millionaire with everything at his disposal. And yet, this one pain refuses to leave. What happens next shocks everyone. I'll do it. I'll heal you. For the million. You? A waitress? You think you can fix me? This is a joke. But Callie isn't just any waitress. She's hiding a secret. And in seconds, everything will change. Before we jump into how this unbelievable moment unfolds, take a second to subscribe so you don't miss any of the twists ahead. Also, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is, and make sure to comment your thoughts. Would you trust her with $1,000,000? Elliot Stone had it all. A multi-million-dollar empire, luxury cars, a penthouse in the heart of Beverly Hills. But there was one thing money couldn't fix. The chronic pain in his back that had been plaguing him for years. No doctor could help. No amount of therapy seemed to do the trick. And tonight, surrounded by the elite of Los Angeles, the frustration boiled over. "I'll pay $1,000,000, he declared, his voice sharp and cutting through the laughter in the room. "Anyone who can fix this in the next few minutes. $1,000,000 for anyone who can heal me. Right here. Right now." The guests exchanged glances, some snickering, others skeptical. It wasn't the first time Elliot had made a big, bold bet, but this one felt different. The stakes felt higher somehow, and they all knew he wasn't joking. He wasn't the type of man to waste time on idle threats. Callie Johnson, who had been moving quietly through the room, overheard the challenge. A waitress with years of experience serving the wealthy, she had seen it all. The arrogance, the entitlement, the reckless abandon of those who lived above the law. But Callie wasn't intimidated by their wealth. Not anymore. She stepped forward, her voice calm, unshaken by the tension in the air. "I'll do it," she said, her words cutting through the mocking laughter. "I'll heal you. For the million." Elliot's gaze fell on her, a look of disbelief crossing his features. A waitress? He couldn't help but laugh, but there was something about her presence, her quiet confidence, that made him pause. "You?" he scoffed, the arrogance in his voice clear. "What are you gonna do? Rub my back and hope it goes away? $1,000,000 for that?" Callie didn't flinch. She had seen the likes of him before. Rich, arrogant men who thought they could control everything. But not tonight. Tonight, the rules would change. "I'll heal you," she repeated, her voice steady, unwavering. "For the million." The room fell into a stunned silence. A challenge had been thrown down, but no one believed it would be accepted. No one believed a simple waitress could do what the best doctors had failed to accomplish. And yet, she stood there, unbothered, ready to prove them all wrong. The tension in the air thickened, the stakes rising with every second that passed. Elliot stared at her for a long moment. The smirk on his face started to fade, replaced by a glimmer of something else. Curiosity. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't going to be as easy as he thought. But the $1,000,000 bet had been made. The clock was ticking. The challenge had begun. And no one in the room would have predicted how this story would unfold. The room was still. The noise of the guests' laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the hum of quiet conversations all seemed to fade into the background. Everyone's attention was fixed on one thing. Callie. She moved gracefully, her calm, measured steps contrasting sharply with the chaotic energy around her. She approached Elliot, her eyes focused on his pained expression, and without a hint of hesitation, she placed her hands on his back. Elliot stiffened at her touch, unsure of what to expect. His body was tense, every muscle aching from the years of stress and work he had put his body through. He had spent thousands on treatments, on specialists, on therapies, all of which had failed to bring him lasting relief. But this woman, this waitress, was offering to fix him with nothing more than a touch. The room seemed to hold its breath. Callie didn't say a word, simply pressing her palms against his back, feeling the heat from his muscles beneath her fingers. She closed her eyes for a moment, grounding herself, letting the energy of the room settle into the quiet space she had created around them. Minutes passed. No one spoke. The guests watched, unsure of what was happening but unwilling to look away. They were witnessing something unexpected, something that defied all logic. Elliot, on the other hand, was losing his composure. At first he had been cynical, doubting her ability to do anything more than make a spectacle of herself. But as the warmth began to spread through his back, he felt something shift. The usual tightness that had become a permanent fixture in his life started to melt away. His muscles, once clenched and stiff, relaxed, the familiar discomfort slowly giving way to something he couldn't quite explain. His mind raced. Was it real? Could it be possible? His back, which had been aching for so long, was now starting to feel better. He shifted in his seat, testing the movement. He stretched his shoulders, something he hadn't been able to do without wincing in pain for years. The discomfort had lessened to the point where it was almost non-existent. "Impossible," he whispered under his breath, his disbelief barely contained. "How did you—" But Callie didn't answer him. She didn't need to. She simply continued, her hands now gently moving over his back with precision. There was no rush, no eagerness, just a steady, almost meditative rhythm, like she had done this 1,000 times before. The guests in the room were silent. No one moved. The only sounds were the faint whispers of breath as people exchanged confused glances, unsure of what they were witnessing. Elliot's eyes fluttered open, a new sense of wonder creeping in. His body felt lighter, freer, as if the weight of his years of pain had been lifted in mere moments. For the first time in years, he felt like he could move without the constant, nagging ache that had become his shadow. He looked up at Callie, his gaze no longer filled with mockery but something closer to admiration. You actually did it." Callie stepped back, her hands falling to her sides. She didn't look at him, not directly. Her gaze was calm, almost serene. She didn't need his praise. She didn't need his disbelief. She had done what she came to do. But Elliot wasn't ready to let it go. He couldn't quite believe it himself. "How? How did you do it? What did you just do to me?" His voice had softened, the arrogance replaced by genuine curiosity. Callie paused for a moment, looking around the room. She could feel the weight of the eyes on her, the questions in the air, the disbelief, but she wasn't ready to explain herself. Not yet. "Like I said," she finally answered, her voice steady. "I healed you. For the million." Elliot frowned. His mind was still racing, his heart pounding in his chest. He had bet $1 million, not expecting anyone, least of all her, to be able to do anything. And now, the money seemed insignificant compared to what she had just done. "You have to tell me how you did it," he insisted, his voice almost pleading now. "I have to know. No one has been able to help me like this." But Callie didn't respond immediately. She gave him a quiet smile, a small, knowing smile, and then she turned, moving away from him. Her task was done. There was nothing more to say. As she walked away, Elliot watched her, his mind still spinning. She had done the impossible. And now she had earned the $1 million bet. But the question lingered. Why had she refused it? The room remained silent for a moment longer. The tension was thick, the impossible feat hanging in the air like a cloud. And then, finally, the chatter began again, louder now. Whispers of astonishment filled the room, everyone trying to make sense of what they had just witnessed. But for Callie, the moment was already over. She had made her point. And for Elliot, it was just the beginning. If you're as stunned as we are, hit that subscribe button and comment below. Do you think Callie's powers are real, or was this just a lucky fluke? And tell us, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Let's keep this conversation going. The room buzzed with confusion and disbelief, but Callie remained calm. She had come here with one purpose, and now that it was complete, she felt no need to bask in the glory of the moment. Elliot, on the other hand, couldn't stop staring at his back, stretching and testing his newfound freedom. The pain was gone, and for the first time in years, his body felt light. He couldn't fathom it. How had she done it? He stood up, his gaze locked on Callie as she made her way back to the service area, trying to fade into the background. It was as if she had known exactly what to do, and had done it without breaking a sweat. "Wait!" Elliot called after her, his voice now tinged with a mix of curiosity and awe. Callie stopped and turned around, her expression unreadable. There was no pride in her eyes, no satisfaction. She wasn't interested in the limelight. "Yes?" she asked, her tone flat, as if this were all just another day on the job. He didn't move at first. He wanted to say something, anything, to make sense of what had just happened, but the words wouldn't come. It wasn't just the physical healing that stunned him. It was the realization that she had done something no one else could, something that defied all logic. "Who are you?" he finally asked, his voice quieter now, vulnerable. "How did you—" Callie didn't let him finish. She cut him off with a calm, dismissive wave of her hand. "I told you. I healed you. That's all that matters." Elliot's brow furrowed. He was used to being in control, used to getting what he wanted. But this woman, this stranger, had just made him feel powerless in front of everyone. It unsettled him. "But there's more to it, isn't there?" He took a step closer, his eyes narrowing with suspicion and awe. "What are you hiding?" Callie hesitated. She had known this question would come, it always did. But she wasn't ready to answer yet. Not here, not now. She had no intention of revealing her secrets to someone like Elliot Stone, not without a reason. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she turned away, but not before her voice cut through the room like a knife. "I'm not here to explain myself to you." With that, she walked out of the room, leaving Elliot standing in stunned silence. The $1 million bet still hanging in the air. He stood there, watching her go, feeling an odd mix of admiration and frustration. The next morning, Elliot couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He had been healed. A simple waitress had done what the best doctors couldn't. And now, he couldn't stop thinking about her. What made her so different? He tried to tell himself it was just a fluke. But the more he thought about it, the less it made sense. No one should have been able to do that. He had spent years suffering with back pain, seeking out every expert, every specialist who promised him relief, only to end up with nothing but temporary fixes. And then, this woman, this waitress, had done it in mere seconds. Elliot sat in his office, staring at the piles of paperwork on his desk, but his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't focus. His thoughts kept drifting back to Callie. He had to know more. His eyes landed on his phone, and without a second thought, he picked it up and called his assistant, Rachel. "Get me everything on Callie Johnson," he said, his voice tight with determination. Her background, her family, everything. The next few days were a blur. Elliot couldn't stop thinking about Callie. He knew there was more to her than she had let on. But what? Rachel had gathered some information. Callie was from a small, modest neighborhood in Koreatown, a waitress with no notable connections or background in healing. She had no online presence, no social media, and no public record of anything remarkable. Yet, she had managed to do what no one else could. Elliot's curiosity only grew. He couldn't just let it go. There was a part of him that wanted to believe it was a simple trick, some kind of temporary placebo effect. But deep down, he knew it wasn't. He needed to see her again. He needed to understand how she had done it. It was late when Callie received the text from Elliot. He wanted to meet. She stared at the message for a long moment, uncertainty flooding her mind. She hadn't expected him to reach out again, and certainly not so soon. But something inside her urged her to go. She needed to know why he was so persistent, why he couldn't just let this go like the others. She agreed to meet him the following evening at a small cafe in Beverly Hills. She chose a quiet corner, away from prying eyes, knowing that Elliot would come with questions, with demands, and she was ready to answer only those she chose to. When he arrived, looking as impeccably dressed as ever, there was a tension in the air between them. Elliot sat across from her, his gaze intense, studying her. "I can't stop thinking about what happened," he said, his voice low. "How did you do it?" Callie took a slow sip of her coffee before answering. "I told you. I healed you. That's all that matters." Elliot leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "No. There's more. You don't just heal someone like that. You're hiding something. I want to know what it is. She met his gaze, steady and unflinching. I'm not here to explain myself to you. The silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Elliot's frustration was evident, but there was something else there too. An unspoken admiration. He knew she was holding back, but he also knew she had something important, something valuable. And he wasn't about to let it slip through his fingers. The following days blurred into one another as Elliot became consumed by his need for answers. He had been in control of his life for so long, building his empire, securing his legacy, getting whatever he wanted. But Callie had done something he couldn't understand, something that left him feeling powerless. He decided to take matters into his own hands. He didn't trust just any source of information, so he took a more personal route. He made discreet inquiries about Callie's family, something he hadn't thought to do before. His search led him to Grace Johnson, Callie's grandmother, a woman whose reputation had been both revered and whispered about in the alternative health circles. Grace had been a well-known healer, regarded by some as a genius, while others in the medical community had dismissed her work as mere superstition. But after a scandal years ago, she had faded into obscurity. Elliot found himself staring at old articles, interviews, and police records detailing Grace Johnson's controversial rise to fame and eventual fall. There was mention of her unorthodox methods, healing practices that the wealthy and elite had once paid top dollar for. There was also a suggestion of something more sinister, how the medical community had fought to silence her, and how some believed that she had disappeared for good after the authorities had cracked down on her. As he read, a thought began to form. Callie wasn't just any waitress. She wasn't some random person with a fluke talent. Her grandmother's legacy ran deep, and her skills were more than just a lucky trick. This was about family. This was about something passed down, something hidden. But why had Callie never mentioned it? Why had she kept it all a secret? Elliot's obsession with Callie only grew stronger after his discoveries. He couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play, and his curiosity quickly transformed into something more intense. His mind raced with questions about her family, her abilities, and the mystery surrounding her grandmother's past. The more he learned, the more he realized he was in deeper than he had anticipated. His business dealings continued as usual, but his focus was increasingly divided between his work and Callie. He wanted to get close to her, to understand her, but that wasn't all. There was another layer to this. He wanted to control the situation, to understand the full extent of what she was capable of. The power she held over him, over his body, was unlike anything he'd ever felt. And then there was Avery, Elliot's fiancée, who had started noticing the shift in him. She had always been observant, a woman who knew how to keep a grip on things, and she wasn't blind to the way Elliot's attention was divided. She could see the growing tension between him and Callie, and it made her uneasy. One night, while Elliot was lost in thought, Avery confronted him. "I know what you're doing," she said, her voice cold and calculating. "I know you're obsessed with that woman." Elliot's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "I'm not blind, Elliot. I see the way you look at her, and I know what you're trying to do." "Don't think I don't know what's going on here." Elliot remained silent, guilt creeping in. He had been trying to hide it, but the truth was impossible to deny. Callie had stirred something in him, something he didn't understand and wasn't ready to admit. "You're playing a dangerous game," Avery added, her voice laced with venom. "And I don't think I want to be part of it anymore." Elliot's heart raced as he watched her walk away, the weight of her words sinking in. This was the first betrayal, but not the last. His fiancée, the woman he had planned to marry, was growing more distant by the day, and he knew it was because of his obsession with Callie. Callie was no stranger to pain. She had grown up in a world of hardship, fighting to survive in a neighborhood that was anything but glamorous. Koreatown was far removed from the wealth and luxury of Beverly Hills, yet it was where she had learned the true meaning of resilience. Her grandmother, Grace Johnson, had taught her the art of healing. But it wasn't just physical healing. It was about inner strength, intuition, and the ability to read people, to understand their true needs. But Callie had always kept her abilities hidden. She had seen the way people reacted when they found out about her grandmother's work. She had witnessed the scorn, the rejection, and the ridicule. People in her community had treated Grace like a pariah, labeling her as a fraud, and Callie wasn't about to put herself through that same treatment. She had learned early on that some gifts were better kept secret, yet she couldn't deny the pull of Elliot's challenge. The $1 million was tempting, yes, but it was more than that. It was a chance to prove that the rich and powerful couldn't buy everything, not even their own health. As Callie reflected on her past, her thoughts turned to the day she first learned of her grandmother's fall from grace. She remembered the moment when Grace had been silenced, her work dismissed as nothing more than pseudoscience. But Grace had known the truth, and so did Callie. The power of healing wasn't about fancy degrees or prestigious titles. It was about the ability to connect with someone on a deeper level, to understand their pain, their struggles, and to help them find peace. But Callie couldn't let herself be vulnerable, not with Elliot, and certainly not with anyone who might exploit her abilities for personal gain. Her resolve began to harden. She had a plan, but she needed time. And she couldn't let Elliot, or anyone else, get too close. The more Elliot dug into Callie's past, the more he realized he didn't understand the full story. Callie wasn't just a waitress. She was a force to be reckoned with, and he was only beginning to uncover the layers of her life. The deeper he got, the more he felt the weight of the secrets she carried, secrets that could bring down the very world he had built. And then, a new development came to light. Avery, feeling threatened by Callie's growing influence, decided to take matters into her own hands. She was going to make sure Elliot stayed in line. And if that meant playing dirty, so be it. She began to manipulate the situation, subtly planting seeds of doubt in Elliot's mind about Callie. She made him question her intentions, her motivations. She made sure that Elliot's focus remained on Callie, while she silently worked behind the scenes to undermine her. But Avery was playing a dangerous game. Callie had her own plans, and she wasn't going to let anyone, especially someone like Avery, stand in her way. As Elliot grew more entangled in Callie's world, the lines between loyalty and betrayal began to blur. Callie had her own secrets to protect, and she wasn't about to let anyone take advantage of her or her family again. If you're hooked by this twist, don't forget to hit subscribe and comment below. What do you think of Avery's move? Do you believe Callie's motives are pure, or is there more to her story than we know? Let's keep this discussion going. The evening air was thick with tension as Elliot paced through the grand hall of his mansion. His mind tangled with thoughts of Callie, Avery, and his family. The revelation of his fiancée's manipulation had hit him hard, but it was nothing compared to the bombshell that was about to drop. Elliot had always prided himself on being in control, on managing his empire and his personal life with precision. But the more he tried to untangle the web Callie had drawn him into, the more he felt like he was losing his grip. She had become a puzzle he couldn't solve, and the closer he got, the more his world seemed to spiral out of control. That night, after dinner, Callie had agreed to meet him at his estate, but only under one condition. She would not speak to Avery. She had no interest in the games his fiancée was playing, and Elliot had to respect that. He couldn't help but admire Callie's strength. But it made the situation even more complicated. When she arrived, Callie's presence filled the room with an unspoken intensity. She was calm but wary, aware that the stakes had just been raised. Elliot knew it too. This wasn't just about healing anymore. This was about power, control, and hidden agendas. "Callie," Elliot said, his voice heavy with frustration. "I need you to understand. I don't want to lose you in all of this, but I'm caught between you and Avery. I don't know who to trust anymore." Callie didn't respond immediately. Instead, she took a slow breath, letting the weight of the moment settle around them. "Elliot," she said finally, her voice soft but firm. "You're not losing me. You're losing yourself. This isn't about me or Avery. It's about you finding a way out of your own mess." She stood there, the faint glow of the chandelier casting a soft light on her face. Elliot couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more she wasn't telling him. She had been hiding her true intentions for far too long, and tonight she was going to reveal everything. Without warning, Callie dropped the bombshell that would change everything. "I didn't come here for the $1 million, she said, locking eyes with him. "I came here because I'm not just some waitress. I'm not just some healer you can use to fix your body. I came here to show you the truth." Elliot stared at her, confused. "What truth? What are you talking about?" Callie took a step closer, her gaze unwavering. "The truth about your family, your mother, your business. They've been using people like me for years. Your entire empire is built on the exploitation of others, and you've been blind to it." The words hit Elliot like a punch to the gut. He had always known that his family was ruthless, but to hear Callie speak so plainly about it, to hear her expose the lies he had been living, left him speechless. His mind raced, but before he could process it all, she continued. "I'm not going to let you become like them," Callie added, her voice hardening. "You think you can buy everything, fix everything with money, but some things can't be bought, and if you keep going down this path, you'll lose everything, including yourself." Elliot's world, which had always seemed so secure, suddenly felt fragile. He had built his empire on the backs of people like Callie, using his wealth and influence to manipulate situations. But now, as he stood before her, he felt like the walls were closing in. "Callie, you don't understand," he started, his voice shaking slightly. "I didn't know. I didn't realize what I was doing. But you're right. I've been blinded by my own power." Callie shook her head, her expression a mix of sadness and resolve. "It's too late to fix what's already been done. But you can stop now. You can walk away from this life. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find a way to heal yourself for real. Not just your back, but your soul." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the weight of her words. Elliot stood there, his mind a whirlwind of confusion, guilt, and a strange sense of liberation. For the first time, he wasn't sure who he was anymore. Elliot's resolve was tested over the following days as the tension between him, Callie, and Avery reached a breaking point. The business deals continued. But Elliot could no longer pretend that everything was fine. He had seen the truth, and he couldn't unsee it. The final confrontation came one fateful evening, when Callie returned to the stone mansion, this time with a clear purpose. She wasn't going to back down, and neither was Elliot. The stakes had never been higher, and their fates were about to collide in a way neither of them could have predicted. Avery, who had been quietly plotting her own moves, was ready to fight for control. She had been manipulating Elliot for months, using his guilt and insecurities to keep him under her thumb. But now, with Callie in the picture, Avery realized that she had lost her grip on him. As Callie and Elliot faced off against Avery in the grand living room, the tension was palpable. Words were exchanged, accusations hurled. But in the end, it became clear that Avery's power over Elliot had reached its limit. She wasn't the woman he had thought her to be. She was just another part of the system he had been trapped in, the system Callie was determined to tear down. Elliot made his decision. "Avery, I'm done," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "You've lied to me. You've used me, and I won't be part of this anymore." Avery's face twisted with anger, her eyes flashing. "You think you can just walk away from this?" she hissed. "You'll regret this, Elliot." But it was too late. The weight of her words didn't scare him anymore. He was no longer the man he had been. He had seen the truth, and it was time to make things right. The final chapter was one of redemption, not just for Elliot, but for Callie as well. After the confrontation, Elliot made it his mission to dismantle the corruption within his family's empire. He reached out to people who had been harmed by his actions, offering reparations and working toward building a more ethical business. Callie, though still wary of trusting him fully, remained by his side. She didn't need his wealth or his validation, but she had seen something in Elliot that gave her hope. A chance for change, not just for him, but for everyone. Their journey wasn't over, but they were no longer bound by the lies and manipulations of the past. Together they began to carve a new path, one where healing wasn't just physical, but emotional and spiritual as well. And as they sat together, talking over coffee in a quiet cafe, there was a sense of peace that hadn't been there before. Elliot had learned the hardest lesson of all, that true power comes from within, not from money or control. And Callie had found something she hadn't known she was looking for, a future that was hers to create. The days following Elliot's decision were not easy. He had dismantled the empire he had spent years building, not with a fanfare of victory, but with the quiet determination of someone who had finally seen the cost of his actions. His family's wealth, once a symbol of his success, now seemed hollow. Something that had corrupted him and kept him from understanding what truly mattered. Callie stood by his side, not as a partner in business, but as someone who had walked a different path. She had always been self-reliant, and though their bond had deepened over the course of the last few months, she wasn't the type to allow herself to be anyone's savior. She wasn't looking for redemption. She had come here to prove something bigger than herself. And as they sat together, on the terrace of a modest home Callie had suggested they buy, they both understood that they were far from perfect. But they had come through the storm, and they would face whatever came next together. Elliot looked over at her, still in awe of the woman who had changed everything for him. She had shown him what true healing was, not just for the body, but for the soul. What she had done wasn't a one-time trick. It was something much more profound, an understanding that the world wasn't just about wealth or status, but about connection, authenticity, and the power of being seen. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low but sincere. "For everything. For all the ways I let you down before, and for all the people I hurt in the process." Callie looked at him, her eyes soft but firm. "You don't have to apologize, Elliot. I'm not here to fix you. You have to fix yourself." There was a long pause, and then she smiled, a quiet but genuine smile. "But you're on the right track now. You've taken the first step." Elliot nodded, the weight of his past decisions still heavy on his shoulders, but not as overwhelming as before. He knew he had a long road ahead of him, but he was ready for it. And so was Callie. In the months that followed, Callie and Elliot worked together to rebuild a business founded on transparency, integrity, and a sense of responsibility to the community. It wasn't easy. There were moments when Elliot wanted to return to his old ways, when the temptation to take shortcuts or cut corners felt overwhelming. But Callie was there, reminding him of why he had chosen this new path. She never told him what to do, but her presence, her unwavering belief in what they could do together, kept him grounded. And the more they worked together, the more they discovered about each other, about themselves, and about what it truly meant to heal. For Elliot, healing wasn't just about overcoming pain. It was about understanding his own flaws, confronting his insecurities, and learning to live authentically. For Callie, it was about seeing the potential in people, even those who had once been blinded by their own arrogance. Their relationship evolved, not just as business partners, but as true equals. Two people who had come from different worlds but had found a common ground. Not through perfection, but through their shared humanity. If you've been inspired by Elliot and Callie's journey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more stories of transformation, redemption, and real healing. Share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think it takes for someone to truly change? Can anyone heal themselves, or is there always a cost? Tell us where you're watching from and what you took away from this story. Let's keep the conversation going and explore the real power of personal growth.